Hello and welcome to Better Construction with Sean McStay, the podcast where we discuss design and construction techniques, products, and details that lead to a better built environment. All right, and welcome to this week's episode of Better Construction. This week I am thrilled to have with me Howard Olsen. Howard is the leading sales strategist and owner at High Output Training System. I've known Howard for a number of years now. He taught me a lot of what I know about sales, and I'm very excited to have him on the show to chat sales and, more importantly, customer engagement. So, Howard, welcome to the show.
Hey, thank you, Sean. It's great to be here, man. And yes, I remember our first encounter and our first engagement. Actually, you came through a workshop a bunch of years ago, and I actually remember it so well because it happened to be your birthday on the second day of that program. And I remember having the kitchen. We were down at the Vancouver Club and had the kitchen bake up a cake for you and brought it up. And so not only did we celebrate your future sales success, but we celebrated your birthday that day. Yeah,
I do remember that quite well also. And I was very surprised. I mean, you were nice enough to have me at your conference, at your presentation, and I learned a lot. And then I got a birthday cake too. So it was pretty exciting.
Well, we all, it was a bonus for all of us because we all got a piece of it. So. So thanks for having a birthday.
All right. Well, for people who don't know you like I do, maybe do a quick intro.
Well, yeah, my name's Howard Olsen. I mean, Sean introduced me as the founder and lead sales strategist here at High Output. Listen, I'm a sales guy. People say, "What do you do?" And I say, "Well, I'm not a sales guy, but I am a sales guy because I fundamentally believe that we're all in sales, but." Now I'm a professional keynote speaker. I've got a training company. I do a lot of leadership training programs. I've even got a speech development program. I work with leaders and government leaders and help them really craft keynotes when their message matters and their message really needs to reach. So I do all kinds of different things. So I say, well, I'm not really a sales guy anymore, but I'll teach you about sales. And I'm not really a marketing guy, but I'll help you, massage your message. And I love the name of your show, Better Construction. I'm not in construction, but I'll help you construct a better sales process. And so that's kind of what I do.
Awesome. Yeah, well, I appreciate that. And I think, the better construction side of things for me, I have a wide variety of people on the show, and having someone like yourself on the show is really important because a lot of my audience are contractors or architects. Mm-hmm. A lot of them are small business owners. They have 1, 2, 5 people at their company. And so they are looking at, they like you said, they're in sales too, even though if that's not officially their title. So I think these types of skills are important for them. Before we jump into some of the sales questions that I have, though, you have a really cool background story. So maybe talk a little bit about how you came into sales and then how sales kind of transitioned into a training side of things.
Yeah, well, let's see if I can give you the Reader's Digest version of this. I mean, I think I was always, it started at the age of 6. I never forget my mother coming to me one afternoon. She says, she called me Howie, okay, with a Hungarian. I said, Howie, Howie, why you like to get in trouble so much? And I was a clever kid. I did pretty good in school, and I was always bored with things. She said, why you like to get in trouble so much? And I said, Mom, you don't understand. It's not the trouble that I like. It's finding a way out. And it was always by use of my mouth and finding a way to deke around things. And so, it was kind of a game for me. But, as I went through high school, I did all kinds of things. So I sold everything from $20 pizzas to T-shirts and bikinis down in the Fort Lauderdale Strip because I grew up down in Fort Lauderdale. You'll hear it in my accent. I'm a Canadian, born in Toronto, but my dad was 60 when I was born, so he retired down in Florida. So I went to high school down there. So I sold bikinis and T-shirts on the Fort Lauderdale Strip. Went to university, got a business degree, ended up in the logistics business, so air freight, sea freight, warehousing, distribution, multi-global logistics programs of companies like Hewlett-Packard and Logitech and Boeing and Lockheed Martin and these kind of guys. And, this pattern just kind of followed me around. The last company I worked for was, we were 35,000 employees, 40 billion in revenue. And, but even when I was a junior sales rep, senior guys would come to me and say, hey, listen, you're really good at this. And good at what? You seem to know what you're doing with customers. I got a problem. The client's kind of ghosted on me. What would you do about it? And I said, I don't know. Tell me the story. Give me the context. Where were you? How did you end up where you're at? And I would listen to him for a little bit. And I said, well, I think this is your problem. Go try this. Go acknowledge it. Tell him, say this, try that. And he'd come back and he'd say, that was amazing. It worked. And I said, yeah, I mean, it's just, you have to understand how people think. You got to look through their eyes and listen with their ears. And, and this pattern just kind of followed me all over the place as I developed my career. I ended up moving to Hong Kong and became director of global sales for, a major multinational company. And even then, although I was responsible for our tier 1 Fortune 5 accounts, really spearheading, multinational globals. Although it was not part of my job description, I just found myself coaching and mentoring people underneath me. I had about 1,000 reps reporting to me on a dotted line. So I was quarterbacking the global deals, but working through local sales channels to keep the local service to these multinationals. And then I moved here to Vancouver. I took the corporate handcuffs off, moved from Hong Kong back into Vancouver and started a marketing company. I took it from like 0 to 10 million in the first year and got it up to about 20 million in year 2, which was pretty remarkable. But things started happening. My clients would start to call me and say, listen, you're brilliant and your ideas sound great, but they don't work. And I said, what do you mean they don't work? He said, well, we're getting customers, but we're not closing. I said, yeah, the problem is my stuff actually does work. I'm bringing you traffic draw. The problem is your people don't know how to sell. I tell you what, let me think about that. So I began doing just kind of ad hoc training programs as a value added offer to my clients so that the marketing programs would actually work so we could draw traffic. And then I would teach them how to convert it. And I wasn't charging anybody for this, but I understood that if I could help them sell, my marketing programs would be even more prolific. And it worked. I mean, I was making a lot of money and they were all succeeding. And then word got out and said, you're pretty good at this. So I started getting calls. Hey, would you come and do this? We heard what you did for those guys over there. Could you come and do the same thing for us over here? And all of a sudden I got really busy, just doing training programs. I was in the shower one morning, just kind of rinsing the shampoo out of my hair, and this light bulb goes off and says, you're not in the marketing business. You're actually in the training business. And that was 20 years ago, and that's when High Output Training System was born. So this lifelong pattern of people asking me for advice and coaching and mentoring and training. So I literally locked myself into a room for 6 solid months, deconstructed 20 years of sales calls to find the commonality. I mean, no two conversations are the same. But the structure is pretty similar. The structure of how this needs to unfold. The art and science of building trust and credibility and getting inside their world and understanding where they're coming from. The structure of getting to that place is the same. And so I literally, over the course of 6 months, deconstructed it so that I could intentionally sell this, not just as these kind of ad hoc things. And I ran my first training program, I guess, 19 and a half years ago. And I think I probably met you somewhere in there. I think if this is 2000 to 2020, we probably met somewhere around 2005, 6, 7, somewhere in there. Yeah, a long time ago.
Yeah, definitely was a while ago for sure. All right. So you're an expert on sales. I agree with that. I've been doing this for 15 years now, and there's still lots and lots to learn. And I always appreciate your content online. When people who are listening to this, who maybe are, a small business owner or medium-sized business owner, when someone comes to you looking for advice on sales and they're in that position, how do you start that process of figuring out what their sales process needs to be?
Well, I think the process is always, for me, the structure of the process is always similar, is always the same, whether it's B2B or B2C. But the content that goes into it and how we structure it and how we approach and the context of that. So it really begins with an engagement. Just, hey, tell me about your world. Help me understand, what you're doing now. What's the profile of a typical customer? What is it you're selling? And the first thing I discover is that they really don't understand what they're selling. And let me tell you what I mean by that. They actually really do understand what they're selling. They understand the product. They understand the technical merits. They understand what it does. The problem is they're selling products and services. And the first thing I have to correct for them is, listen, here's what you need to understand. People don't buy products or services. They buy outcomes. They buy solutions to problems. Like, look at me as an example. We're having a conversation now about sales training. I absolutely guarantee you do not want to sit through a 2 or 3 day training program. What you want is better sales results. You want better conversions. You want higher engagement with your customers. And you want to be able to articulate your value proposition so you can sell more at higher margin and do it with less pressure or friction and do it consistently. You want to differentiate from all of your competitors so that you're seen as a high value proposition. The challenge is we have to be able to articulate your value proposition from the customer's perspective and not yours. Because if I ask 3 people what value means to them, 3 of them are going to have different answers to that. And so what we need to start with is, what are the typical outcomes that you deliver to your customers? So nobody ever hired me for a training program or a keynote speech, but it was the training program and the keynote speech that delivered for them the result they were after. They were either looking for better sales. Like, I had a client come to me recently, and, after we began talking, okay, so what are you looking for? What are your key challenges? With this whole COVID thing, their business had dropped. They had to go through a round of several layoffs, and which was painful for the entire company, because nobody likes to do that and nobody wants to be the receiving end on it. But the staff that are left behind, they're now in fear that they might be next. And management knew that, okay, listen, we've cut as far. We didn't want to even do what we did, but we had to do it to survive and to maintain our survivability and keep the staff that we've actually got. But now the rest of the staff, it just totally destroyed the morale around the place. So their sales tanked and the morale went down. So when I actually began the engagement, like, what are your key challenges? Well, our morale is off, and here's why. So they needed a program that was going to encourage, lift, bring up their spirits, but also give them some structures with a message that, hey, we're going to invest in this now because this company loves you enough to provide you with skills, tools, and mindsets to equip you to be as successful as you're capable of being. So what did they buy from me? Well, they bought a training program, but it's not the training program that they wanted. And the same thing is true for every customer I work with. The thing that you think you're selling is not the thing that you're selling. It is just the vehicle to deliver the result that your customer is after. So we have to begin to understand what that is. And that's really where every engagement starts.
Okay. So then what are some tips for someone to figure out what it is that their customer really wants? Not what they think that they want, or maybe even what they say they want. How do you determine what the customer really wants?
Well, it's basically, there's two parts to that. So first, there's a whole pregame routine. I mean, first of all, every call you have, whether it's a prospecting call or a first time meeting or even a follow-up call, every call has to have a purpose or an objective. Like, you have to know why you're there. Otherwise, it's just a waste of time. So a first time engagement for me, and this is what I teach all of our clients, there's two parts to it. It's about coming in and asking some really intelligent, thought-provoking questions, but not as an interrogation, really as a conversational construct. I want to have a conversation. So, Sean, for example, if you were a customer that I was meeting for the first time, or a prospect, it'd be, hey, Sean, great to finally meet you. I've really enjoyed speaking with you on the phone all these times. Great to finally hook up over Zoom or Boneyard or at Starbucks or wherever we are. And, let me tell you what the agenda is from my perspective, Sean. Here's what I would like to do. I really would just like to get to know what's going on in your world, what's happening inside of your business, to make sure that I understand it, and to see if there's a fit between what we're capable of doing and what you might be looking for. And so that's really what I want to do, to see if I can even help you. Because, listen, we do a lot of things for a lot of companies, but I might even be the right one for you. So my objective today is really to determine whether there's a fit and whether I can actually help you with that. So, and then from your side, what are there any specific outcomes that you're looking to happen as a result of this conversation? I give you an opportunity to talk about it. And they go, no, this is pretty much what I'd like to have. And I said, great. Well, do you mind if I just ask you a couple of questions? And I can tell you, in 30 years, Sean, 35 years, no one has ever said no. And so it's, you start really high level. So, okay, tell me, listen, I've been on your website. I've read your corporate brochure. I've looked at your annual report or what, but that's a lot of words on pages. How do you describe your business in your words? I start there, really high level. And the problem is, most salespeople or most business people that have a sales or a revenue responsibility, they start coming in directly with questions that relate directly to the thing that they're selling. No, go bigger, go out. You got to look at it from 30,000 feet and come in. So tell me a bit about your business. Great. What are your key challenges? Great. What inspired you to even take this meeting today? What were you thinking when you agreed to sit down and talk about this stuff? And they're going to tell high level, not leading, not prompting, high level, insatiable curiosity questions. What inspired you to even want to have this meeting? And the things that they tell you will astound you, because you didn't come in assumptively trying to sell them anything. You came in with a servant's heart. Listen, the thing you need to understand about selling, it's not necessarily transactional. It's not about an exchange that results in dollars. It is servant leadership in action. It's about genuinely putting the needs of somebody else ahead of your own. And one of the questions I ask in our workshop is, what's the purpose of a business? And I could ask that of 1,000 people, and I 999 of them would tell me it's to make a money or to make a profit. And I said, nope, you're wrong. The purpose of a business is to solve a problem. The thing is, when you're better at solving problems and you're better at articulating how you solve problems, you will actually sell more of what you do, and the end result will be you make more money. So yes, you need to make money. And it is a measuring stick of how good you are at solving those issues. And that's a paradigm shift. So we really have to we have to get into the customer's mind, engage them in some high-level conversation with around the questions that you ask, thought-provoking questions that cause them to think about their situation in a new way. And because you're the one who asked and you caused them to think, they express it, and then they get clear, you get clear, and all of a sudden there's clarity on both sides of the table, and there's no more disconnect between buyer and seller. And it happens live time. So this is not about trickery. This is not about tactic. This is about a methodology that creates for a tighter unity between buyer and seller.
Yeah, that makes sense to me. I mean, I think that a lot of companies where they stumble is that they have a widget that they're in love with and is a really, really good widget, but they don't always approach everyone as trying to figure out how to way to solve a problem that person has. They are maybe trying to find people who need this widget or they think need this widget. And I think that becomes a big challenge. When you're kind of flipping that around and you're looking at, customer development or customer acquisition, what kind of research would you recommend people do before a meeting like that? And how far or how in depth do you think that people should go with, pregame research, that type of thing, about these people, so that you can come in informed, but you still are able to have that kind of high level open conversation?
Well, okay, so that's good. So I'm going to answer your question, but I'm going to precede it, because the thing you need to do going into every one of these meetings is suspend and drop all of your assumptions, because the only assumption that's safe to make is that you really don't know anything until they tell you. All right. So what I'm going to say about pre-sales call planning and research, I run counter to what most say. Check their LinkedIn profiles, look for their annual reports, read everything you can about them, learn, and then go in and ask intelligent questions based on the stuff that you've read. I don't come from that place at all. Of course, I check out their LinkedIn profiles. Of course, I want to know a bit about their industry. But when I go into that meeting, I don't assume any of it. I've sold to Michael. I've been in Michael Dell's office. I've sold to him. I've been in Carly Fiorina's office down at HP, and I've sold to her. My biggest deal to date, well, I don't need to put numbers on the table. It's large, okay? And I'll just give you a little insight into the meeting I had down at HP. Okay, so this was a major logistics program we were putting together, a global thing. And I sat in her office and I said, hey, listen, I didn't say, oh, hey, listen. It wasn't like that. It was, so, hey, great to meet you, all that kind of stuff. I said, listen, I've read, of course, a lot of things about Hewlett Packard. You've been a customer of ours in a couple of different channels for years. This is the first time we're meeting. I've been over your website. I've been through your annual report. I've seen the letters that you've written to your shareholders. I've seen all of that. But you know what? I think the most important thing is, how would you describe Hewlett Packard from your perspective and where you see it moving forward? And I started there. I said, I don't want to come in here making any assumptions at all. And if you'll do that, that is that's a respectful ignorance. So there's one thing when you walk into a meeting and you're completely ignorant about them, that's disrespectful. But if you come in suspending the assumptions and say, listen, I want to hear it from your perspective, because I can't understand your world through your eyes if I don't hear it from you. And that's the intent of your communication. And when you do that, they'll tell you everything you need to know. And so while much of the market talks about doing a ton of pre-call planning, I don't think you need to. I think you need to do a ton of pre-call self-preparation in terms of how you orient your mind, how you orient your stat. And I got a whole routine called the pregame routine that I take people through. This is your pregame. Get in the game. Here's how you do it. And it has everything to do from the body language, your physiology, and how you mentally prepare before you even go into a call, and shake off all the cares of the world before you go in there, because how you're perceived is how you're going to be received. And you need to understand that first. Then you go in with a genuine servant's heart, insatiably curious about what's going on in their world and what their challenges are that you might be able to help them with. And very often, you can be even more expensive than a competitor, but you find a fissure where there is a core challenge that they've told you about, that you've figured out how to solve it, and then it's not about money anymore.
Yeah. Yeah, and I think the pregame routine is really important. And I mean, I've done that for years now after attending the workshop, and you sometimes feel a little silly doing it, but it's really important. And I think it's definitely helpful, especially in sales. If you're a career salesperson, you spend your entire day doing sales meetings, ideally, and some will go well, some won't go well. And so if you're trying to go into a new meeting after one that hasn't gone well, it's kind of a critical thing to be able to reset yourself and kind of make that move forward.
Yeah, it's like a little reboot, I mean, the next customer doesn't care what happened with the last one. That's just that. It's just that simple.
Yeah.
And you might think that you've shaken it off, but unless you have intentionally shaken it off, you haven't.
Exactly.
It's kind of like when that guy cut you off in traffic 20 minutes ago, and you began screaming through the window at him, and then then you think you shook it off, and you walk up. No, you're still physiologically wearing that. So there's a little reset thing that you go through just to get rid of that stuff, so that it's not perceived by the other side when you walk in or pick up the phone or hop on Zoom or whatever you're doing.
Exactly. All right. So we've had that initial meeting with the customer. You've understood some of their concerns and kind of brought those to light with that open conversation. One of the areas of sales that I think I've seen a lot of people in my career fall down on is the follow-up. How do you typically arrange and plan follow-up? And do you do that during the meeting or after the meeting? How do you get that process started?
Well, I always do it during the meeting. So, it's very important to understand what your sales cycle is. What are the milestones or touch points in a typical sales cycle? Like for me, in the training business now, it's usually a 2 or 3 call thing. And so it's a much shorter sales cycle. When I was in the logistics business, like a Hewlett Packard deal worth, a couple $100 million, that is a 3-year sales cycle, could even be a 10-year sales cycle. But every meeting needs to have an objective, a thing that you hope to accomplish by the time you get to that end of the meeting. And most people are focused on the close. No, you're not. Forget it. It's like dating. I mean, if you went out on a first date and tried to ask the girl to marry you, or if you're a female, if you went out on a first date and tried to ask that guy to marry you on the first date, you'd be see you later. There might even be chemistry, but stop. What's the purpose of a first date? It's to figure out whether you actually want to have a second one or not. What's the purpose of a second date? To figure out whether you're so gobsmacked on the first one and whether you're still on track. And then the third one, to continue validating. Fourth one, to develop that relationship. You know more about each other. Fifth one, okay, listen, we're solid now. And then eventually, you get down to a proposal or whatever it is you're going to do. Well, it's the same thing in selling. All right. So typically for me, and this would apply for it. So I'll use me as a metaphor for others. Like my first call is always, it's an exploration call. It's a discovery call. Okay, listen, I just really want to figure out what's going on, see if there's a fit, figure out what, first of all, that we're culturally aligned. Secondly, that you have a need that I can actually even help you with. I don't want to assume that I've helped a lot of people. I can probably help you, but I don't know that yet. And you start with that kind of attitude, and it's so empowering for you. And it's so, it just reduces any nuance of pressure or friction, because it brings out their cooperation, because you haven't come in assumptive. Listen, I'm really curious about you. So the first call is always discovery, and I come to a place of conclusion. So I've been listening to you, and I understand, from your perspective, these are some of your core challenges. Is that right? And they go, yeah, that's pretty much it. Have I missed anything? And they go, no, you got it. And they at that moment, they feel profoundly understood. Well, according to my sales process, the next thing for me to do would be to generate a proposal that reflects the things that we have just finished speaking about. So if I know that that's the second thing, then I'm actually going to, at the first meeting, that's my call to action. That's the commitment I want to gain. Okay, so listen, here's what I need to do next. I'm going to generate a proposal. It's going to probably take me 3 or 4 days to get that out to you. So I'm going to get your proposal. I'll have it to you by Tuesday. All right. Would that be all right with you? Yep. Great. Then what I would like to do is give you a couple days to look at it. All right. So if I were to give you a call on Thursday, would that be all right? Could we have a quick, just a quick 4 or 5 minute conversation just to get your initial impressions about what I'd sent, whether I'm on track or not? And they go, yeah. So I'm already seeking the commitment for the next thing in that meeting.
Yeah.
Right. Now, if it's a longer sales cycle, like you go through a lot of prospecting kind of stuff. So over the years, I've had lots of customers that were prospects for years before they ever became a customer. So on this call, so I just, hey, listen, want to check in with you, and we're staying close, and maybe we had a meeting, or maybe it was by Zoom or something like this. Great, okay, thanks so much. Great hooking up with you again. I said, listen, in your opinion, what frequency do you think I should continue to follow up with you? well, listen, if we got together about once a quarter, that'd be good. All right, I'll tell you what, then I'll give you a shout the end of March, and I'll touch base with you then. Sounds great. So now we have agreed to something. So at the end of every meeting, we have to have agreed to something, and in a non-confrontational, non-kind of pushy way, just in a really cooperative kind of way. But we're always moving the foot. It's like a football game. We're just moving the ball down the field. But if you don't know what the thing that you want to accomplish is, you're not going to be able to close on it. So sometimes closing the sale isn't closing the sale. Sometimes closing is just getting an agreement on the next logical thing to do. But all parties have to know what it is. So there's no miscommunication. There's no buyer's remorse, and there's no unanswered questions. And now everybody's agreed to this. So when you call them in 3 months or when you call them on Tuesday, they're expecting it because the two of you already agreed to it.
Exactly. No, that's fantastic. Switching gears just a little bit, because I'm curious with your perspective on this, what has changed in sales in the last 10 years, maybe even 20 years? Because there's always a new sales technique or a new sales, very hip book that's out.
Yep.
What from your actual experience in the field has changed in sales?
Okay, this may be very controversial. Nothing. All right. So listen, I put it like this. And this is my problem with there's a lot of great books like the Challenger Sale, and there's all kinds of them. And it's great material. It's great stuff. The problem is they always it becomes the flavor of the month. And the flavor of this month contradicts the flavor of next month in some way, form, or fashion. And I think the thing that we need to realize is before we start bringing on new combinations and permutations of new thinking, sometimes we just got to go back to basics. Because I'll put it like this, that, the nothing has really changed. I mean, the vehicles of communication, like when I started my sales career, there was no such thing as Twitter or Facebook. Man, we didn't even have computers, and there was no internet. I mean, we did everything by telex. In around 1990, that's when fax machines came out, and that was groundbreaking and revolutionary. I mean, I remember my office when I first started it. We would send telex to our overseas office. We'd put the telexes out before we left the office, and then in the morning we'd come back, and there were these little pigeonholes, and all the telex responses were sitting there, and we picked them up, and we were literally going back and forth telex like almost like Morse code on paper. And then then the fax machine came out, and so that sped things up a little bit. And then around 95, email became kind of mainstream. And then, then we got into instant messaging and all kinds of things. And so I would say this, the vehicles of communication have changed, but the fundamentals of building trust and human connection has not. We are still wired for trust. We still have, I would say the biggest thing that has changed, in fact, I think, we can talk about what is the most valuable commodity today, gold or silver or oil or water or whatever it is. I think it's trust, because what has happened with all these technologies has been thrust upon us. We're bombarded with messaging. We're bombarded with marketing things. We're bombarded with falsehoods. There's corporate malfeasance. There's political intrigue. There's all kinds of stuff going on. And we're all walking around a little jaded with our guard up. It's a normal and it's a natural protection mechanism. I think the biggest thing has changed is that we are far more guarded with our trust today than ever before. And so, we would have never done a sales call via video conference 8 years ago.
Yeah.
Today it's routine. But if you look at the conversation that we're having, it is still a natural, organic dialogue between two human beings. But instead of having a table between us, we've got a camera between us. So the thing that I would recommend to most people, if you're doing stuff by Zoom and Skype and all these, or Microsoft Teams or whatever you're doing, look at that camera and think of it as though it is just the table between you. It is still a human interaction. It is still about building trust, establishing credibility, and getting to a place of knowing with your customer. That is the biggest thing that's changed, is the technologies. Okay. But the fundamentals of trust and human engagement, they're still the same, because our wiring is the same. We're still emotionally and psychologically wired the same as we were 1,000 years ago.
Yeah, absolutely. No, I completely agree with that. That makes a lot of sense for sure. As I get towards the end of the podcast, I always have 2 questions that I ask. The first one's kind of a fun one because you get a magic wand. Okay. But if you could wave a magic wand and get rid of any one misconception about sales, what would it be for you?
I know what the typical ones are. Most people think it, because I ask this question every one of our workshops, I'm going to use a word right now, salesman. Tell me what you're thinking. And they go slimy, pushy, manipulative, arrogant, obnoxious. I say, yeah, that's right. That is the first trigger thing. And I'll ask that to a room full of salespeople, and that will be their answer. And so I think it's the paradigm around that. And I spend a lot of time front end loading all of our programs with redefining what sales is. So if I had a magic wand, I would wave it over the world, not just our customers and not just my clients, to understanding that selling is just another word for leading, influencing, and communicating when it's done right and for the right reason. It is actually the most honorable thing that one can do when one has a servant's heart. But that is a condition of one's heart and a condition of one's mindset. So I think that would be the magic wand to shift that, because professional ethical selling is really all about leading people to the place that they need to go, because you understand, and it's a being out of a place of integrity and of genuine servitude to another human being.
Awesome. Yeah, I agree with that 100%. The last question I always have is a personal interest question for me. I read and collect a lot of books. And so if you were to recommend a book right now, personal or professional, which one would it be?
Any book on any subject?
Yeah. Personal, professional, any book.
What have I read recently that I read a lot of, I'm a big reader, but I read on a number of different subjects. I'm looking away from the camera because I got a stack of books over here because I was using them recently, but none of them are recent. These are not recent books. They're classics though. You know what? If you haven't read this book, I could come up with lots of great answers because there's lots of great books. I think one of the simplest, most profound books that somebody could read right now is The Likeability Factor by Tim Sanders.
Okay.
Because this is why. I ask people do business with people they know, like, and trust. We've all heard that. Would you agree with that statement? Everybody says, yeah, I agree with that statement. Of the two, like and trust, what's the most important? And of course, everybody says, well, it's trust. I say, yeah, of course, for a long-term sustainable relationship, it must be trust. I said, but let me ask you something. Have you ever stuck around long enough to figure out if you trust someone that you don't like? Have you ever met somebody you didn't like? And did you stick around long enough to figure out whether you can trust them or not? And the likability factor. So likability, from where I'm coming from, is, and I'm not talking about, hey, we're buddies, we have the odd beer together, go out and have a scotch, play golf, all this kind of likability. If it's a measure, likability is a measurement of how other people feel about themselves because of the time they spent with you. And there is a science of it. So when I look at likability, I see it almost as the first ingredient to establishing trust. And there are intentional things that we do. And that book, I've been talking about this stuff, believing it, teaching it for years. And then, I think about a decade ago or a little more, Tim Sanders came out with a book and put scientific evidence behind it. And I went, this guy just put science on everything I've been professing for 30 years. And so I actually use his material in our workshops now because it validates all the other stuff. So it's the science of likability and how to increase the way that others perceive you, because you're actually thinking about the things that you're doing, which are creating the environment that you're walking into. Awesome. It's a great book.
Yeah, that sounds like a fantastic recommendation for sure. All right. Well, Howard, thank you so much for your time today. For everyone listening and watching, I'm going to put links down below to High Output Training Systems, to Howard's social media, etc. So you can reach out there if you're looking to get some training or if you want to learn a little bit more about Howard. And with that, I hope you have a great rest of your day. Yeah. Hey, thank you, Sean. Thanks for having me on. All right. Thanks, guys, for listening to this week's episode of Better Construction. I really appreciate you taking the time to do so. If you have any questions for myself or the guest, you feel free to reach out on social media or on the website at www.betterconstructionmedia.com. And with that, we'll talk again next time.